April 1917. An uneasy neutrality is shattered. Unprepared, but grimly determined, the nation mobilizes to help win World War I. It is a war that has already raged across Europe for 3 brutal years. Trench by trench, crater by crater. A conflict in which the Allies and the Central Powers unleash every weapon in their growing arsenals. By the time the United States enters the war, a new weapon has established itself over the Western Front. This is the first major war where soldiers can look down on the battlefield, where combatants can use the air to carry war to the enemy. It is a weapon to be reckoned with, not only over the battlefields, but over the sea, where the airplane has already demonstrated its value in naval operations. Thus, as the United States Navy goes to war, its new air arm must be mobilized to support Allied operations. New planes and equipment must be developed. Men must be trained to service a growing number of aviation units and fly the new Navy planes. Naval aviation must be prepared for the first test of war. The Navy enters the war with 54 planes, most of them unfit for combat. Yet these planes must be flown by men like C.E. Sugden, a Coast Guardsman.
I'll never forget one of the first flights I took out of Montauk. With Warrant Officer Thrun, I flew to Martha's Vineyard on a search for submarines. I had no bombs with which to attack them if I saw them, but I didn't see any anyway. Returning from Martha's Vineyard and being rather careless, a fog came in below the ship, and the first thing I knew, there was no land in sight, and I didn't know where I was. Warrant Officer Thrun said he didn't know where he was either. So I put the ship down on the ocean, figuring that perhaps a vessel would come along and I could see her and go over and get directions as to where we were and how to get home. Fortunately, and it's rather peculiar, a ship did show up, flew over to her, waved her down. They sent over a boat, and I went to the ship, found she was a Belgian tramp. She gave us our position at 65 miles from Montauk and 125 miles from the entrance to New York Harbor. He had no gasoline, but he did lend me a boat compass. So we sounded our tanks. We had enough gas, 1 hour's gas. So Thrun took the compass on his lap and gesticulated right or left to keep us on course, and we hit Montauk smack on the nose. And when we landed and went up to the runway, everybody came down, all excited and exercised, wanted to know where I'd been all that time. And they thought I was lost. They had sent a plane out to look for me, didn't find me, and they were getting ready to send out 2 destroyers from the New York Navy Yard to look for me. And then they sounded the tanks, and all that was left in it was smell. There wasn't a drop of gasoline in there. So it was quite an experience, and they never sent the plane out again without a compass from that station. There was no compass in my plane, otherwise I would never have gotten lost.
No compass, no bombs. And in the Atlantic, the sinkings continue unabated. Aircraft are desperately needed to protect Allied shipping. Industry mobilizes to produce planes for the Navy. But the demand for military aircraft is tremendous, so the Navy establishes its own aircraft factory in Philadelphia to manufacture flying boats. Prominent in the design of these planes is Dr. Jerome C. Hunsaker.
After the war had started in Europe, the British made rapid progress in flying boats for anti-submarine work, and we benefited from a knowledge gained from their experience. And by the time we were in the war, we were building at the Curtiss Company, again Glenn Curtiss's help, the H-16 and later the F-5 flying boats, of which thousands were built in this country and shipped abroad as anti-submarine patrol craft. They were possible only because of the Liberty engine. 2 Liberty engines gave the power plant that was needed for such a large flying boat with the heavy gasoline load needed to stay out on patrol for long periods of time, so that our flying boats were doing anti-submarine patrol. And we also used blimps for anti-submarine patrol, not only there, but on the approaches to our own ports. And the Navy got into a lighter-than-air venture then in developing what later came to be called blimps. In that, we had copied the French and the British to some extent, who had started lighter-than-air work. The gas for inflating such ships was hydrogen, highly inflammable and dangerous, but through the Bureau of Mines in this country, it was found that some of the natural gas in Texas, in the Southwest, had helium in it. And by extracting the helium from the natural gas, we could get helium to inflate our blimps, and they would become non-inflammable.
To employ the growing number of new aircraft in naval operations, the Navy needs bases and men. Naval air stations are established on both coasts. Civilians throughout the nation join the Naval Reserve to become the flyers and ground crewmen so urgently needed to bring naval aviation to combat strength. Commanding an early reserve unit is E.O. McDonald.
Early in 1917, Admiral Towers, then Lieutenant Towers, who was Assistant Chief of the Aviation Division of the Navy in Washington, offered me the job of taking charge of the training of the first Yale Naval Aviation Unit. I was very glad to accept and was promptly ordered over to West Palm Beach, where the unit had assembled. For the most part, these boys were juniors at Yale, and I must say that I don't think anybody ever had charge of a finer, more enthusiastic group. We trained at West Palm Beach, and at that time we had mostly civilian mechanics. All the planes that were in use there had been furnished by private subscription of the members of the families and friends of the members of the unit. Later, when we got to, the unit was transferred to Huntington, Long Island, and about this time, Navy planes, Navy personnel were furnished, and gradually the operation took on more of a real Navy flavor. Throughout the instruction, I attempted to teach these boys something about the Navy as well as flying. I gave them lectures in ordnance, gunnery, seamanship, navigation, and so on. there was no doubt about the enthusiasm about flying. However, when it came to my lectures, I found that there was not quite the same enthusiasm. I found out that there was a certain amount of competition among members for seats behind the pillars in the room where I gave the lectures so they could take a nap while I was talking. They didn't know that I knew this, but I was on to it all the time.
Among the first Americans to sail for Europe after the outbreak of hostilities are naval aviators. Men like David Ingalls, a Yale undergraduate.
After we were all qualified and had received our certificates as naval aviators, we were distributed to various parts. First 3 of our crowd were sent overseas. A number were then sent to different, where they were starting different naval air bases in this country. And then 8 of us went over in one group to London. There we really had a good time because we had just been given or bought our new uniform, the forest green naval aviator's uniform, and it had a shoulder strap with a star on it, an ensign, of course. And the British and any other troops in London knew nothing about this uniform, and they saw the star, and we were saluted by practically everybody in London. And of course we were all kids, and we didn't mind being given a little acclaim as we walked down the streets of London and enjoyed ourselves.
Soon they are arriving by the thousands. Fighting men of the American Expeditionary Force bound for the front. To escort them into port, seaplanes, flown from French bases by Navy airmen of the 1st Aeronautic Detachment, the first American combat unit to arrive in France. One of its members is Joseph C. Klein.